Hello, welcome to 10 at 10. My name is Michael Ramage. I'm the director of the Cyber Education Research Center here at Murray State University. And welcome back to 10 at 10. 10 at 10 is brought to you through a partnership between Murray State University, Grow West, the Technology Council of West Kentucky, KY Innovation, and our local partners, Sprocket Innovation in Paducah and the Kentucky Innovation Station in Madisonville. We are back for episode 120. This week, we're going to talk about really, we're going to try to answer the question, is antivirus software enough? It seems interesting that often during the week, I will hear the same question asked over and over. And over the last week or so, I've heard the same question, is antivirus software enough? It's been asked to me two or three different ways. I've heard it in a discussion, I've heard it in a talk, I've had offline conversations with a couple of folks about it, and the question continues to be: is antivirus software enough? So let's really dig into that question today, and I want to do this by starting with a little bit of history. If you'll remember, maybe you don't, maybe you're not old enough to go back this far, but back in the early 2000s, even then in the 99s, the 90s, not in the 99s, but back in the 90s, there were viruses, there was malware, there were worms um, that had some pretty definite signatures that you could look for. If it looks like this, if it has these words in the code, if it has this phrase, if it has this title, if it includes this graphic, there were different things, and it gets more complicated than that, but there were different things that we could look for that we would know this is a virus, let's block it. That was pretty easy. Fast forward, really, that's still the same feature that antivirus does today. But let's even take a step back from that as we come forward and think about, we are trying to protect the endpoints of our network. That's the goal. Do we want to put antivirus software on our endpoints, or do we need to put something else on there? That's the question really that we're asking. Is antivirus software enough on our endpoints? Now, if I ask you what is an endpoint, you may not know that. So let's start there. Let's first just look at what an endpoint is. An endpoint is the desktop computer. It is your laptop. My smartwatch just dinged. It is that. It's my phone. It's my tablet. It's even a digital printer. It's IoT devices. It's your servers. It's any device, endpoint device that is on your network. And our task is, how do we protect the devices on our network? Is antivirus software enough? So look at these devices. How many of you have antivirus software on your IoT devices, on your smartphones, on your tablets? If you have antivirus software, my guess is the only place that you have it is on your computer, desktop computer, laptop computer, server. That is probably the only place that you have that software today. But let's go back, take a step back. How does antivirus software work? AV software. It its goal is to identify malicious software or code on a computer. It is typically, not always, typically looking for a signature that provides some indicator that there is malicious intent with a piece of software. That's its goal. Now, initially, there was just antivirus software, and then came along anti-malware software, and then there was pop-up blockers, and sometimes they were combined into one piece of software. But in its truest form, antivirus software typically uses signatures to identify malicious software or code on a computer. Typically, if that happens, it'll do one of two things: either pop up an alert that there has been malicious software uh, that has been found on the computer, or number two, it gets quarantined, or some combination of the two. Those are typically the two responses. So now the question is that enough? And the argument and the whole reason we're having this discussion today is that no, it is probably not enough. What else do we need to do to make sure that we have enough protection on our endpoints? That's the question. So let's talk about the option. The option is endpoint detection and response. EDRs is the term. That type of software is now available in a variety from a variety of vendors, and it is different than antivirus software, but in for many organizations, it's a replacement for antivirus software. So its goal is detecting, containing, and remediating threats as they occur. So the goal is real-time monitoring and detection of threats. Did you hear that difference? Of threats. Yes, it's going to try to identify those or those viruses that an antivirus software would identify, but it's also trying to identify those that might not be recognized by standard antivirus software. It's trying to go a step beyond what can be found on that antivirus software. So yes, it is trying to do that. Um, it can detect based on abnormalities, easy enough for me to say. If the traffic looks abnormal, then maybe that's a signature that it could identify. That endpoint detection and EDR software endpoint detection response um, can look at signatures. It can collect data and analyze it, determine threat patterns. It can determine, it can alert organizations to threats. There, there's a lot more intelligence built into these EDR pieces of software than what is in AV software. So the answer is antivirus software um, enough? No, it's probably not. Um, EDR software is really the better option now. Um, yes, EDR software can sandbox quarantine in a way that AV software quarantines a virus. Yes, it can do that, but the response piece is important. That it can not only just do um, that quarantining, it can actually automate a response to that threat and actually remove it from the environment. EDR software is what I recommend for you. Frankly, every endpoint in your network should have some EDR software on it. It allows much greater control of that from a security stand of your endpoint from a security standpoint. One other piece I'll note on this, and this is how endpoint security works. If you look at this, there's some sort of endpoint software that detects and blocks malicious activity. That can all be done in that EDR software. But the reason I'm showing this, and the reason I'm showing this graphic, is that if your network has multiple points, what would be even better is if they all work together. That not just your piece of EDR software, but all the endpoints in your organization. That might be tens, that might be hundreds, that might be thousands of endpoints within your organization. If all of those endpoints could talk together and all of those endpoints shared that information, then in this case, through a security operations center, through a SIEM, a security incident and event management software, then all of that software could come together. You could look at potential threats, not based on just what you're seeing on your computer, but what we're seeing across the organization. And that would allow us to see potential threats far greater than what just a piece of antivirus software can do. And so that's why if you talk to security professionals today, they're recommending EDR software on all of your endpoints, and it is really important that you consider that. I hope you found that interesting. I hope you found that helpful. That is something that we haven't talked about much on 10 at 10 in the past, but I wanted to make sure I touched on it. And if you have questions, let me know. Reach out. I will be happy to help you walk through that process. And there's a ton of vendors around the area that can help you with that as well. If you have questions, let me know. Thank you for joining, and I'll see you next week back here on 10 at 10. Thank you. Bye.